Well, good afternoon from the cottage farmstead. Last weekend I had some help here and I took advantage of it to get our entire onion harvest in. As you can see, we have some that are quite large, but then we also have some that are a little bit smaller. I did a sampler pack of different short day varieties and found that the white and the yellow did the best, and the red Creole ones just weren't thriving, and most of those actually had bloomed on me. But the rest of the crate needed chopping, as that is my preferred way of preserving onions. I do have some that I let cure that I use throughout the summer, but short day onions will not last the entire year in your root cellar. They only have a 3 to 4 month shelf life anyways, so I like to go ahead and spend an afternoon or two in the late spring, early summer and pre-chop them for all of my upcoming cooking throughout the entire year. It's a great time-saving trick in the kitchen, and it only takes a couple afternoons of chopping and is a time that I usually enjoy listening to an audiobook or catching up on some YouTube videos. If for some reason you're new to chopping onions by hand, the technique that I'm doing in this video I learned from a super basic knife skills class I took probably about 9 or 10 years ago at this point, and it's come very in handy. It makes pretty quick work of getting an onion from whole to minced very quickly. After you peel it, of course, you're going to cut it through the root side of the onion, and the root area is going to help hold your onion together while you finish doing the mince part of it. So as you can see, the onion is still holding together, and then you turn it over and then you cut almost to the root the different size dice that you want, and then you go back and cut perpendicular, and then you will end up with a perfectly diced tomato. I like to take the end where I almost cut through and do a quick little cut to get a little bit more off of it, and then I save the rest of it for broth. If you're wondering why I'm spending all this time doing it by hand rather than making use of a food processor, our food processor actually doesn't do a very good job at chopping, at least the way I want my onions chopped. So our food processor will either grate the onions, which I have done in years past when I was running short on time, or it'll mince them. But I can't get the nice petite dice that I would like to use in my soups and stews and most of the cooking that I do throughout the year by using my food processor. When the garlic harvest starts coming in the next week or two, I will definitely be making use of my food processor to mince all of it very quickly and to acidify it in citric acid before I pack it in oil. I'll link to a video that we have done in the years past on how we preserve our garlic in minced form. But for onions, I definitely prefer chopping them by hand. In the scheme of things, it doesn't really take that long. I probably spent 4 hours this entire week working on chopping an entire year's worth of onions, and that translates into time savings throughout the rest of the year when I'm in the kitchen, as all of my onions are pre-chopped for all my recipes. There are ways to make this process run a little bit more efficiently. So when I know I'm gonna have a good block of time, I actually like to top and remove the roots and the dirty peels outside for either a whole crate or a whole bowl of onions at a time, and then bring them inside for the chopping process. This particular day, I wasn't sure how long I was gonna be able to sit and chop my onions, so I was doing a handful at a time to make sure that I didn't have a whole lot of onions that would need storage in our very crowded refrigerator while it awaited a time and day that I could finish the project. And for all of you wondering why I'm wasting perfectly good onion skins for making broth, I am not wasting all of them. Any of the peels that are not covered in dirt or the little roots ends or any of the centers that don't cut very well, I am saving in a gallon Ziploc bag and will be using them for making broth. But when we have such an abundant onion harvest, it is not worth the amount of time it would take to get every little bit of dirt off of the freshly harvested onions. So I only save the ones that are clean. So this afternoon I had enough time to chop 2 baking trays worth of diced onions. I like to flash freeze my diced onions on a baking tray before I pack them away in bags. This helps prevent them from clumping together inside of my bags, which makes it a lot more difficult to measure them out when I am cooking with them later. So this ends up being the next day, as I was not able to get around to packing them up the day before, but that's totally fine. It just works around whatever schedule that you are working with. It's very forgiving that way with using the freezing method for preserving your onions. So I just label my quart bags. I used to freeze them in gallon-sized bags, which in some ways is more efficient space-wise in the freezer, but I found that it was a lot more difficult to have space in my smaller refrigerator freezer here upstairs by having so many gallon-sized bags. So this year I decided to try to put most of my food preservation into quart-sized bags so that my upstairs freezer can remain a little bit more efficient and easy to use. So after filling up my bags, I like to use what I call the poor man's vacuum sealer, which is a straw. I learned this from my mom. It's a way to suck out with the straw a lot of the excess air that is in your Ziploc bag, which in our experience helps them to last a little bit longer in the freezer, similar to vacuum freezing it, but without needing a special piece of equipment to do so. And with just those 2 trays of onions, I have about 1/3 of the onions that I'm going to need for the year. And as you can see, I have another bowl of onions awaiting chopping this afternoon. So I'll catch you next time.